Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm Lori, and today I'm so excited to bring you the wrap-up from our 5-star prediction rounds a couple of months ago. As you may remember, or if you're new to the channel, you may not have seen, I was asked to be a guest participant in Sarah and Lindsay's 5-star prediction round for this last few months. They are at Sarah's Nightstand and Lindsay at Lindsay's Little Library, if you haven't been to their channel before, but they're amazing and incredible people and friends, and I just loved every minute of being a part of this partnership with them. For my 5-star prediction round, I chose 3 books that I thought would be a 5-star prediction, and we had to have heard about them on a podcast. That was our theme this time. And so I had heard about each of them on a different podcast, and you can look at that first video if you want, but here's the wrap up from our reading. So I read The 100 Years of Lenny and Margo by Marianne Cronin. I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And this was a book of the month year-long selection. So I thought that, that was pretty well liked. And then I chose Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. So I'm going to tell you how this went. And I think I'll start with Age of Vice, because this was the one I read last of the 3 that I chose. And this was the one I did not finish. Nope. It was not a 5-star read for me. I was really struggling with it. And I was really sad because I had listened to at least one podcast, if not more than one. I had looked at some reviews. It really seemed like a plot that was up my street. I just couldn't get into the characters. So I started out by listening to this on audiobook, and then I thought perhaps if I went to the physical copy more that it would be different, because sometimes a book just isn't well suited to audio. Didn't. So it begins in New Delhi, 2004, and it begins with a man named Ajay there's a car crash, and Ajay is found in the car, and he's stunned and he's, injured, and all these people have been killed in this car crash. He's whisked away, obviously, and then there's this backstory that begins about Ajay's life, his life when he was born and into this impoverished family, and how he is then sold to a family who raises him as their own, and he works for them, and then he is transferred to someone else over time. So the other characters are Sunny and Nita in this book. I never really got to anything significant about Nita, so I'm not sure if she plays a particularly large role in this, but 155 pages in, there was only a casual mentioning of Nita. It is a kind of a family, a mob story, I would say, here in the US, but I don't know what they really call it there in India. But it is a story of a family who has a good deal of money, and they have some holdings and some interests in some things, and they have some people all around that are watching and maintaining some silence about a variety of things. Ajay wants to know desperately what happened to his parents. He also is pretty happy with this family from what I could see. I just couldn't do it. It was just so hard. So I DNF'd this. But in the interest of really having 3 books that I wanted to give a shot and that I thought might be 5 stars, I then picked up The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth, because I had listened to a podcast about this too that interviewed her. It was the Book of the Month podcast. So this was not in my original video, but I thought, I have it. They talked about it. It sounded really good, and I thought I would give it a try. And I liked this a lot. It was not a 5-star read for me, but it was a 4-star read for me. So that's not too bad, right? Okay. Pippa and Gabe live on a cliff in somewhere in Australia. And this cliff is known for being a place where people come to take their lives, to jump off the cliff, if you will. And Pippa's husband, Gabe, has a pretty successful record of talking people off of that cliff. This woman enters their purview and from their house this one night, and he goes out to talk her off the cliff, and he is not successful in doing so. She jumps to her death, and there is some gesture that he makes that makes Pippa really wonder if he knew this girl and if he maybe had something to do with her death. This begins this unfolding of the relationship between Gabe and Pippa and this woman and her. It takes a trajectory that I really did not anticipate, but it was a 4-star read for me. I think the reason it wasn't a 5-star read for me was that I just wasn't feeling like there were times where I just felt like the characters were just a little less fully expressed or explored than they could have been, I guess, is what was a concern for me. Or maybe it was they were just a little less likable than I kind of wanted them to be for a 5-star read. But I did go through it really fast. Once I decided to pick it up, I really, flew through it. I would read another Sally Hepworth. In fact, I'm looking at finding them at a discounted price. So 4 stars, solid for me, maybe even 4.5. And then I read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which I like to call Tomorrow Cubed, just for ease in saying it. But this was a second novel for me by Gabrielle Zevin, and I had high hopes for this as a 5-star read because the first one I read, which was The Story Life of A.J. Fikry, was indeed a 5-star read for me, even in the rereading. It was. I heard about this on a podcast. It was talked about a lot. It was the book of the month or the book of the year selection from the Book of the Month Club. And it was not a 5-star read for me either. However, at first it was feeling to me like it was going to be a 3 or 3.5, really. And then it popped up in the end. I really feel like it was a 4-star read for me. So let me set this up by saying, if you didn't watch the original video, this follows 2 friends, Sam Mazer and Sadie Green, who met as young people. It progresses into what happened to keep them from being connected for a period of time. There's something that occurs in their relationship and they are no longer friends. And then they reunite in a subway platform and rediscover each other as adults in university. And they end up partnering on a game that Sadie has created an idea or a spec around because they were both gamers as young people, and she's looking to produce gaming products. I'm not a gamer anymore, but I have been a gamer, so I don't think you have to be a gamer to love this book. This book follows the span of time of their lives, and it's a pretty significant span of time. It also follows some other characters that come to life in their story. The writing is great. The character development is solid. The only problem I had with it was I felt like it was so this one is, let's see, it's almost right at 400 pages. I feel like this could have been done in about 200 and 250 pages. And we could have eliminated a couple of years worth of activities, really. That was really it. Like, I did care about the characters. I really ended up loving another peripheral character named Marks much more than I loved either Sadie or Mazer, but I would recommend it. I am glad I read it. I'm glad I bought it. And then the first one that I read is the last one that I'm going to talk about, and that's The 100 Years of Lenny and Margo by Marianne Cronin. Book darts galore on this one. 5-star prediction, 5 beautiful, glorious stars, 10 stars, really, almost for me. Honest to goodness, this was so perfect. And I read it at a time that was also perfect. This is not an easy read. This is a emotionally difficult read for a lot of people, but I felt like even though the subject matter was emotionally challenging, it was handled in a beautiful way. So this follows Lenny, who is 17 years old and has a terminal illness, and the beginning of the story about her begins with her meeting with a priest from this facility that she's living in, and really trying to understand God and understand his perspective of God. And she's a quirky, sensitive, lovely being who had to come to grips with the fact that she was 17 and she was dying of an illness that there was no treatment possibility for her. She meets Margo sort of as unexpected, in an unexpected way, because Margo is actually trying to take something that is not hers, and she discovers this, she senses it, and she ends up kind of distracting the people around them so that Margo can get away with it. And I just thought that was kind of a fun way for them to meet. Then she joins the arts and crafts circle, and she meets Margo for real, and they begin a friendship. So this is sort of the telling of their stories. It is primarily the telling of Margo's story, I guess, for the most part, because Lenny's story is much more in the present, but the impact of their stories and the impact of what has happened to Margo over time and the journey to where they are together. I don't want to spoil anything. I just cannot say enough about this. Ironically, it reminds me of the way I felt when I first read the story Life of A.J. Pickford by Gabrielle Zevin. It was like, I know this will be one of my top 10 favorites probably for all time. And while it made me cry, and it would probably make anyone cry just because of the way that their stories are told, like you're crying, not just, for sadness. I mean, you're crying because these wonderful things happen, and it's just so unique. And I cannot say enough about it. I feel like everyone should read this. And I read it at a time where we were going through a really difficult piece of life, where we had put our little dog to sleep, and I was grieving over the loss of her, and I thought, this is ridiculous, why am I reading this? But I realized that it actually was a cathartic experience for me to read this at the same time that we were making that decision, because I was able to get some of that emotion out in another way. And I was also able to just distract myself with a really great story about two really amazing human beings and the people that were around them, that were caring for them. 5 stars for sure. Tomorrow Cubed, 4 stars, but I'm glad I read it. The Soulmate, 4 stars, also glad I read it. And it was very unique. And I really appreciated the author's perspective on that podcast about it, and then a DNF for me. Am I going to keep this and maybe give it a chance in the future? Possibly. I maybe am going to see if my boys want to read it. They might. They might find it to be a very different experience than I did. So there we go. You just never know. You really think for sure that you're going to give something 5 stars, and then in the end, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But again, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll go over and check out Sarah and Lindsay if you're not already a fan and a subscriber of them, because they have great picks, and I can't wait to see and hear what they thought about the books that they chose. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy reading. Bye.